Captain Cap Reviews.
Hello and welcome to Captain Cap Reviews. I'm your host, Captain Cap, and today I finally took the time to beat Pokémon Mystery Dungeon DX. About a month ago, to be more exact. I made a video about a month ago about my thoughts and feelings towards the demo version and for my hopes for how the rest of the game would pan out. And after completing it recently and playing a good chunk of the endgame, I can confidently say that this game is an excellent remake. But there are a few flaws that hold it back from being the definitive Pokémon Mystery Dungeon experience. That'll always go to Explore the Sky, no questions.
Last time we answered some questions, I became the Pokemon known as Machop, who apparently had memories of being a human, and we formed the Pokemon rescue team called Team Cap. And then the demo ended. Great.
But the good news is, once you buy the full game, your progress is transferred over from the demo version, meaning you don't have to redo everything up until this point, which is a really nice touch.
So, what's the story? Well, in the world of Pokemon, there are many natural disasters running rampant throughout the land, and it's the job of these rescue teams to delve into various locations, or as they're known as to us, the player, as mystery dungeons. In these mystery dungeons, these rescue teams would, funnily enough, rescue other Pokemon, including you and your own rescue team which you form with your partner, who I named Goldie.
Goldie. She says her name is Goldie.
And together, we set off and become the greatest rescue team the world has ever seen, which brings us swiftly onto the gameplay.
Which, near the beginning of the game, is nearly stupidly simple.
First things first, you gotta get a job from the post office, which has a convenient sinkhole, which is much easier than running through the town. There you can choose a job, and away you go to save enough of Pokemon for money, items, and rank points. All mystery dungeons are basically randomly generated mazes, with different themes which you need to find the staircase to each floor to progress or just to escape. The first couple missions are quite easy, but you have to be able to deal with the traps and the other Pokemon who set out to attack you, who don't care that you're trying to, rescue someone who is in peril or is injured. You just don't know.
Which you could argue that's a more of a territorial thing, but come on, why are they so heartless?
So if you want them to back off, you need to fight. And the battle system is partially taken from the main series games and just adapted to fit the dungeon crawling gameplay. You still have stuff like attack, defense, speed, and experience points. Every Pokemon you encounter has a type, like fire, ice, and electricity, which have a whole host of strengths and weaknesses. The Pokemon that I became was a Machop, a fighting type Pokemon, good at taking down rock or steel type Pokemon, but completely useless against ghosts or psychics. Not to mention, some types actually have environmental advantages. For example, water types and flying types can walk on water. Hallelujah! If you want to take down your opponents quickly, you need to know which type is effective against what. It's kind of like Mega Man bosses. To put it simply, fire burns grass, water puts out the fire, and grass absorbs the water. It's quite simple from there. Also, if you're going on a mission where you have to delve very deep into a dungeon, you need to keep an eye out on your power points, which you need in order to spend to perform moves. Run out of them and you and your teammates are utterly useless. But there is a way around this. There is a meter for every move. The more you use it, the more it fills up. And when it fills up, it increases in power and accuracy and in power points, which is great if you have a favorite move that doesn't have many power points. You also have to keep an eye out on your hunger, the health, and the weather if you want to survive long enough in the dungeon to complete your mission. But if you don't want to use any power points, you can find orbs, throwable weapons, and wands if you want to fight back. And also, it helps conserve your power points, or PP for short.
PP.
But if you're lucky, you can come across a shop run by a Pokemon called Cassilion. Now, not only am I going to give you some mystery dungeon advice, but some general life advice. You do not fuck with Gekleon. And if you want to try to be sneaky and leave the shop without paying, he teleports in front of you and asks you, to pay up. And if you have the gall, the audacity not to pay up,
you'll pay with your life.
he'll slaughter your team, multiply himself into multiple versions of himself, and hunt you down throughout the floor until he easily defeats you.
How disappointing.
This is more or less how the original game played out, but the remake has a few more additions that make it a bit more interesting and more convenient than the original game.
The remake is much more streamlined and kinetic due to the use of additional abilities. It grants you and your teammates perks like lower hunger, walk through walls, or increased recruitment chance. I actually prefer this over the IQ system from the original game. I don't know, it just kind of felt a bit tedious finding the right colour of gummy for that specific Pokemon, and you really didn't know what you were going to get. Also, like Super Mystery Dungeon, they threw in Mega Evolution. Actually, it's more prominent in the end game, but it does add a new layer of strategy. The way it works is, once you take an empowerment seed, you Mega Evolve, which boosts all your stats and grants you a new ability. Only problem is, some enemies can Mega Evolve too, so you need to watch out for that.
You could be moseying along and then all of a sudden the camera cuts to a random enemy that decides to Mega Evolve. It's kind of obnoxious, honestly. You could be like minding your own business and then this guy over here, he says, "Oh, look at me, I've ascended!"
Also, have I mentioned how much I love these visuals? I'll always have a soft spot for the sprite work in the original game, but this game is a definite upgrade. Even if that's the case, in the camps, you and your teammates are represented by sprites from the original game, which is really cool. All the models and backgrounds almost have this grainy outer layer and bold outlines, which is really stylized and harkens back to the illustrations in the main menu. I was half worried that they would mess up in the soundtrack department, as I did grow up with a lot of these tracks, but in my opinion, I think they did a much better job here. Essentially, they redid the music with proper instruments to add to the whole remake thing. Have a listen for yourself, side by side.
But despite how many Pokemon you rescue or how other rescue teams come to respect you, this is the part of the story where your team becomes outlawed. Why? Well, I'll tell you.
Do you remember those natural disasters I was talking about earlier? Well, a lot of Pokemon have pinpointed the cause to a popular legend. Long ago, there was a Pokemon called Ninetales, and its tails were indeed magical, and if you were to touch one of them, you'd be cursed. One day, a selfish human approached the Ninetales and touched one of its tails, and before the curse can affect him, his Gardevoir appeared and took the curse for him. Feeling sorry for the Gardevoir, Ninetales asked the human if he wanted to help the Gardevoir, but by that point, the human ran away. And so, to punish him, Ninetales made it so that someday, that human will become a Pokemon. And whenever a human becomes a Pokemon, the balance of nature is thrown out of whack. There's also evidence to suggest that we were that same human, as Gardevoir keeps appearing in our dreams. And sure enough, word spreads out by Gengar, who has given us trouble in the past, and we're forced to leave town as an outlaw.
And the accompanying music is incredible. It's sad, but also very compelling as you go on your journey, not only to escape persecution, but to find the truth behind these natural disasters. And it also marks a point where the game starts to get more difficult.
And while you're on the run, you can't bring any other team member with you except for your partner, and you can't recruit anyone as other rescue teams are trying to hunt you down. Eventually, we make it to Mount Blaze, a blistering volcano, and if we want to get any further, we need to beat Moltres, one of the legendary birds, and after beating him, we reach the top of the volcano, but we need to keep moving, otherwise we'll be caught. Which brings us to Frosty Forest, beaten, cold, and nowhere near closer to finding out the truth, and we press on until we encounter Articuno, one of the legendary birds, who is much tougher and he managed to beat me a few times.
And believe me, you do not want to faint in a Mr. Dungeon game.
But if you do, you lose all of your money and all the items you brought into the dungeon. The game punishes you if you don't prepare yourself with items, and it stops the game from being too easy, which meant on several attempts in Articuno, I had no healing items to sustain myself during the battle, and essentially I just threw a mine and goalie's corpse at Articuno until I won. And after beating him, Absol rushes in to calm him down, and he decides to join our team. And we make our way through the blizzard until we find Mount Freeze, where we're cornered by Team Alakazam, a gold rank rescue team.
That's almost as bad as naming your YouTube channel Captain Cap. Oh, wait.
We are forced into battle until Ninetales rushes in to explain that even though we were transformed into a Pokemon, we weren't the exact same human from the legend, meaning we were completely innocent. Even with our names cleared, we are no closer to solving these natural disasters, and it seems that a legendary Pokemon called Groudon has been woken up by the earthquakes, which means they're only going to get worse. Several rescue teams tried to go down to calm him down. Some came back battered, and some of them didn't even come back at all.
So, naturally, it's down to us to go down there and rescue them. Oh.
I remember having a ton of trouble with Magma Cavern in the original. The dungeon was much easier in the remake, but hot damn, the fight against Groudon is really tough. Not only are you first stage Pokemon fighting against a Pokemon who supposedly forged the continents of the world, but the fight begins with an earthquake separating you from your team. Also, several tiles would be covered in magma which burn you. But somehow I managed to beat him, but we can't celebrate yet as a star is falling towards the earth. But that night, we are visited by Gardevoir, and she tells us that once we save the world, we will turn back into a human and go back to the human world, fulfilling our role.
It is a role-playing game after all, but when all is said and done, after you complete your final mission, you have to abandon your partner who stuck with you for the whole game.
Which is easier said than done because we have one final dungeon to conquer, the Sky Tower, and at the top is a Pokemon called Rayquaza, and with his power, he should be able to take care of the star for us. There are a ton of floors and tons of tough Pokemon, and at the top of the tower, we meet Rayquaza, which I gotta say, he was much easier than Groudon, and he blasts the star out of the sky and we save the world. Then we make it back to the Hill of the Ancients, back with everyone, and we finally celebrate. Until you begin to fade away. The fading away scene is a staple of the Mystery Dungeon games, and no matter how old I get, or how many times I replay the specific game, it's always a tearjerker. It's like one of the saddest things I've ever seen.
Even when it's remade, it's still sad. And as you fade away to the swelling music, the the game finally comes to an end.
And then the credits roll. But for some reason, we're given a second chance and we return.
This may mark the end of the campaign, but you still got a good endgame to go through.
You can even rematch and recruit legendary Pokemon, and there's a second campaign involving Gengar and Gardevoir.
Which I actually never reached in the original, which was a really nice surprise.
Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX, but I do have to say the gameplay does get repetitive, especially in the endgame. Although, I'm also noticing more and more as I play the endgame how dependent you are on items. No matter what Pokemon you are, I'm always finding myself relying on items rather than my skills and abilities.
I'll have to say that I was actually a little underwhelmed by the story, which isn't the game's fault, as it's a direct copy from the original. Before I made my demo video, I replayed the original game so I could see the differences between them. Although it did help immensely on the review making side, I got really tired of knowing of what was going to happen and why.
And I can definitely see myself pulling this game out now and again on the go. You know, if I had anywhere else to go than my living room or my bedroom.
Personally, despite the flaws and the monotony in the gameplay on occasion, overall this game is good, and if you're a veteran to the series or just someone new, please pick it up. And I would like to say I would like to see Pokemon Explores the Sky remade in the exact same way, but I have a feeling that I'll have similar problems with that game if it does come out. Anywho, I'm Captain Cap, and thank you very much for watching. Play me out the toe!